11,000 light-years away, two planets just smashed into each other. The wreckage is glowing at 900 degrees, and it's orbiting at the exact same distance from its star, as Earth orbits the Sun. You're listening to Stardrift FM. Tonight, the Artemis II Moon rocket is rolling back to the launch pad right now as we speak. Two planets caught mid-collision, a world made of magma and rotten eggs. A star so old it remembers the first generation. 10,000 Starlink satellites. A geomagnetic storm painting the sky. And Europe just bought its own spaceship. Grab your coffee. Let's get into it. Right now, and I mean right now, a 322-foot rocket is crawling toward Launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center. It left the vehicle assembly building just after midnight. 4 miles, 12 hours. 1 mile per hour. This is the second time they've tried this. Back in February, the rocket made it to the pad, and then engineers found a helium blockage. A dislodged seal inside a quick disconnect was physically stopping helium from reaching the upper stage. They had to roll the whole thing back. Weeks of repairs. The March window, gone. But now the seal is fixed. The batteries are replaced. A faulty flight termination harness has been swapped out. Flight readiness review on March 12th pulled go. And 4 astronauts have entered quarantine in Houston. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, who will become the first black astronaut to fly beyond low Earth orbit. Christina Koch, who holds the record for the longest single space flight by a woman. And Jeremy Hansen, the first Canadian ever to leave Earth's neighborhood. Their mission, 10 days, a free return loop around the moon. They'll fly farther from Earth than any human has ever traveled, farther even than the crew of Apollo 13. The last time anyone left low Earth orbit was December 1972. Apollo 17. 53 years and 3 months ago. If all goes well, Artemis II launches no earlier than April 1st. The moon rocket is moving, and this time it's not coming back to the building. There's a star called Gaia 20 EK about 11,000 light-years away in the constellation Puppis. For years, its brightness was perfectly flat, normal, boring. Then in 2016, 3 dips. In around 2021, in the words of the astronomer who found it, it went completely bonkers. The visible light started flickering wildly. But here's the strange part. The infrared did the exact opposite. As the star dimmed in visible light, it got brighter in infrared. That means whatever is blocking the starlight isn't cold dust. It's hot. 900 degrees hot. Glowing. The best explanation. 2 planets crashed into each other. A staged collision. 3 grazing impacts in 2016 as the bodies spiraled closer. Then a full catastrophic merger around 2021. The debris cloud is massive, comparable in mass to an icy moon like Enceladus. And the orbital distance? About 1.1 astronomical units, the same as Earth. 4.5 billion years ago, a Mars-sized body called Theia hit the early Earth at roughly the same distance from a similar star. That collision made the moon. What we're watching at Gaia 20 HK might be the same process, happening right now, in real time, 11,000 light-years away. 35 light-years from Earth, there's a planet that smells terrible. Well 98-59d orbits a red dwarf star every 7.5 days. It's about 1.6 times the size of Earth. And it's covered completely globally in molten lava. JWST detected hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg gas, in its atmosphere, along with sulfur dioxide. Its density is way too low for a normal rocky planet. Too heavy for a gas world. It doesn't fit either category. An Oxford-led team has now figured out why. The planet has a permanent magma ocean extending thousands of kilometers below the surface. That ocean stores enormous amounts of sulfur dissolved in molten rock. Over billions of years, the magma slowly releases sulfur gas, which UV light from the star converts into the cocktail of compounds JWST detected. Lead author Harrison Nichols puts it simply: the categories astronomers currently use to describe small planets may be too simple. L9859d doesn't fit the boxes. It needs a new one, and it may be the first recognized member of a whole hidden population of sulfur magma worlds. There's a tiny galaxy called Pictor 2. It's about 147,000 light-years away, a satellite of the Large Magellanic Cloud. It has only a few thousand stars. It's ancient, over 10 billion years old, and it has barely changed since the early universe. Inside it, astronomers found a star called PICU 503, and its chemistry is extraordinary. It has less iron than 1/43,000th of the Sun. That's the lowest iron abundance ever measured in any star outside the Milky Way. But its carbon-to-iron ratio is 1,500 times higher than the Sun's. That chemical fingerprint tells a very specific story. The very first stars, Population 3, were massive, short-lived, and made entirely of hydrogen and helium. When they exploded in low-energy supernovae, the heavy stuff like iron fell back into the remnant. But lighter elements like carbon were blasted outward. PICT 503 formed from that carbon-enriched gas. It's a second-generation star carrying the chemical fingerprint of the very first stars in the universe. A fossil from the dawn of time, preserved in a galaxy so small and quiet that nothing has disturbed it in 10 billion years. Lead author Anirudh Shetty, discovering a star that unambiguously preserves the heavy metals from the first stars, was at the edge of what we thought possible. At 1:19 in the morning on March 17, a Falcon 9 lifted off from Vandenberg carrying 25 Starlink satellites. That launch pushed the active constellation past 10,000 for the first time. 10,000 active satellites, 11,500 launched total since May 2019, less than 7 years. SpaceX now controls roughly 2/3 of every active satellite in orbit around Earth. The scale is hard to process. 10 million customers across 160 countries. A Falcon 9 launching every 2.3 days on average in 2026. 79% of those launches are just Starlink. And this is only the beginning. SpaceX has approval for 42,000 satellites. Elon Musk has talked about 1 million for space-based AI computing. Meanwhile, Amazon's competing constellation has 212 satellites, 1/50th the size. But 10,000 objects in orbit come with a cost. The American Astronomical Society says the sky is brightening by a factor of 2 to 3 from sunlight bouncing off satellites. SpaceX's attempts to reduce brightness, DarkSat, VisorSat, were both abandoned. And every satellite that burns up on re-entry dumps aluminum oxide particles that break down ozone. The space economy is booming. The question is what it's doing to the sky. If you're anywhere in the northern United States right now, look outside. A barrage of coronal mass ejections has been slamming into Earth since yesterday, and the timing couldn't be more dramatic. It started on March 16th. Sunspot region AR4392 fired an M2.7 flare that hurled a coronal mass ejection directly at Earth. More flares followed on the 17th and 18th. At least 4 CMEs are arriving in quick succession. NOAA issued a G2 moderate geomagnetic storm watch with a chance of reaching G3. That means aurora potentially visible as far south as New York, Montana, Michigan, and Illinois. Best viewing 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., and there's a new moon pitch dark skies. But here's what makes this special. The spring equinox is today, March 20th. At equinoxes, Earth's magnetic field aligns in a way that lets the solar wind slip through more easily. It's called the Russell-McPherron effect. Essentially, cracks open in our magnetic shield. Geomagnetic storms are nearly twice as common around equinoxes than solstices. Solar cycle 25 peaked in 2024, but the sun is still swinging hard on the way down. Scientists are calling March 2026 the last best chance for equinox aurora displays until the mid-2030s. 4 CMEs, an open magnetic shield, a pitch dark sky. If you can see north, look up. At the 345th ESA Council meeting in Interlaken, Switzerland, this week European member states quietly endorsed something significant. It's called EPIC ESA Provided Institutional Crew. And in plain English, it means Europe is buying its own Crew Dragon. Until now, European astronauts have flown to the International Space Station as guests on Russian Soyuz, then on NASA's Crew Dragon missions under seat swap agreements. ESA provided hardware, NASA provided the ride. Europe had no independent crewed access to space. Epic changes that. ESA will purchase a full Crew Dragon mission, not seats, the entire flight. Planned for the first quarter of 2028, ESA picks the crew, ESA invites partners, ESA runs the mission. It's still an American vehicle, so this isn't full autonomy, but it's institutional independence. And with the ISS scheduled for deorbit around 2031, this is Europe making sure it squeezes every last drop of value from the station's final years. Also this week, Cyprus became the newest ESA associate member on March 17th. 4 countries now in that club. Europe's space family keeps growing, and it just bought its first car. That's 7 stories tonight. A moon rocket rolling to the pad for the first time in 53 years. 2 planets smashing into each other at the same distance as Earth. A world covered in magma and sulfur. A star carrying the fingerprint of the first generation. 10,000 satellites owned by one company. A geomagnetic storm lighting up the equinox sky. And Europe, quietly, buying its own seat at the table. This is Stardrift FM. Thanks for tuning in.